Welcome, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Regina. I am one of the reference librarians here at the State Library, and I want to welcome you to today's program, Interviewing Tips and Tricks. Before we delve into our subject matter for today, I just want to go over some general housekeeping rules. First of all, the presentation is being recorded and a recording will be available on the New Jersey State Library's YouTube channel. I believe you get a follow-up email after the program and the recording URL will be included in that message. If you have any questions at any point during the presentation, you can ask them using either the chat or the Q&A functions on your Zoom dashboard, and we're going to go over what that looks like in just a second. I am going to hold all questions until the end of our presentation. I sent you all the files. I think one person came in after I sent out the slides via chat. So I'm going to repost them again at the end of the presentation. So you will get a copy of the slides. Immediately following the program, there is going to be a survey that will pop up on your screen and also in the follow-up email. If you could please complete that, that would be absolutely wonderful. And it really helps the NJSL Presents program to develop future content. The Bureau of Workforce and Labor Development has a really nice webpage with a lot of information, and I have the link at the bottom of the screen. This is what you should be seeing in your webinar display. You'll notice there are 3 buttons in the center bottom of the screen. To the left, we have the chat. To the middle, we have the raise hand button, and to the right, we have the Q&A button. So again, you can use either the Q&A or the chat to answer any questions, and you can raise your hand if you have any problems or issues. Again, I did post the chat right before in the chat, I did post the handout right before we began, which is the PDF version of the slides we're going to be looking at today. I will post them again at the end of the presentation. And I will do my very best to try to keep on top of technical stuff. I don't know how effectively I'm going to be able to do that while I'm trying to present. So please forgive me. I am a one-woman show today, and there are usually 2 of us, one person doing all the tech stuff in the background and somebody presenting. So my apologies in advance if there are any technical issues. I will try my best to keep an eye on the chat while I am presenting. All right, so let's delve into our presentation. Interview tips and tricks. So here's what I want us to accomplish today. I want you as the audience to be able to identify important steps to prepare for an interview, be able to understand the key points of the interview process, be able to recognize and have prepared answers to popular interview questions, to understand and use the sharp and SOAR methods for answering questions when we are preparing for our interview and during an interview, and to talk a little bit and understand how interviewing may work while we are in this lovely global pandemic that we have been in. So let us dive in. So there are several types of interviews, and some of these, like the panel, you could have a panel interview, both an in-person interview or online or via phone. But in this day and age, I feel like in-person interviews are rarer and rarer just because of safety and precaution issues. So potentially more frequently, you're probably going to be in either an online or a phone interview. What is the interview process? Well, we get ready for our interview first, and we may have a shorter, more preliminary interview to start. So preparation is when we're researching, we are getting ready for the interview, we are gathering information about the company, and we are practicing and rehearsing our responses to some of the frequently asked questions. We may have a shorter preliminary interview with maybe a smaller panel or just one-on-one with someone who may not be directly involved in our hiring. I've been through these before. They're kind of like screening interviews just to make sure the company thinks overall that you would be a good fit. Next stage is the more formal interview. Within the interview, you are going to want to set the tone and set a fantastic first impression with your greeting. You're going to be telling people who you are in a personal summary. Both the interviewers and you are going to be asking each other job-related questions. And then you are going to leave your interviewers with a great impression of you as a candidate for this position in the wrap-up. Following the interview, there is always follow-up, either by phone or by email, to reiterate your interest in the position. So how do we get ready for an interview? A good place to start is with yourself and having a good understanding of your own personal career goals, both short and long term. And the best way to highlight your career goals are in these prepared answers to common interview questions. So I recommend, when I would prepare for interviews in the past, I would, write down one of the typical questions is, so tell us a little bit about yourself. So I would write that on one side of a flashcard, flip it over, and do my little personal summary spiel on the back. And I would rehearse this, and I would try to write the answer in a way that would sound natural if I, we're just talking to a person. So that way it didn't sound forced or like I was reading a memorized quote, but I definitely had some strategic ideas of what I wanted to convey through my questions and answers to the interviewers. You always want to be ready to discuss everything that you've included on your resume and cover letter, especially things that may seem to be irrelevant to the position. Like if you accomplish something really cool, but on the surface seems to have nothing to do with the job itself, that might be a great thing to bring up in your interview and talk about why and how that particular thing translates into this particular role and how it would make you a great candidate. And then possibly the most important thing is to make sure that not only you're prepared for the interview, but that you are well rested, clear-headed, and just ready to go into your interview feeling very confident and sure of yourself and what you are doing. I feel like if we are very nervous, we tend to lose some sleep, or we're not taking as great care of ourselves as we should be. And that may make us less focused and less ready to go into the interview with our best foot forward. So try to make sure that you have a good night's sleep and that you're not feeling too jittery or nervous when you go into your interview. As part of your preparation, make sure that you're researching your organization, who you're working for. The organization's website can be a great tool. The About Us section, most companies or even nonprofit organizations, community organizations have some general information about who they are and what they do. Usually in the About Us section, you can find things like mission statements, strategic planning, strategic visions, press releases, recent accomplishments, things of that nature. And this, of course, will help you to tailor some of your responses as you're preparing your interview questions and showing that you've done some research on the company demonstrates your overall interest in working there. Part of demonstrating your interest also includes being able to ask questions to the interviewers about both the organization and the job position. Again, that's a basic way to demonstrate your interest and your enthusiasm for the position and may make your pitch to be a candidate for the position stronger. There are all kinds of resources online that you can use to find out more information about the company culture, figure out if you might like working there, to figure out how they treat their employees. So just a couple examples are Glassdoor and LinkedIn. And you can find out some great information there so that you have a better idea of what you're getting yourself into by applying to this job and what you're getting yourself into if you do get this job. Another thing to look at is your social media content. Just from an etiquette perspective, I think by this point, everybody knows, when you find out about someone or you meet somebody new, first thing you do is you Google them. You're trying to find their social media, see what they're all about, all that good stuff. If you have a personal social media, probably a good idea is just to lock it down, make it private, keep that stuff shared with your friends and family and people who are in your personal life. If you have a professional social media, like if you're doing something where you want to highlight certain aspects of your work and share certain aspects of your work and your expertise with the wider world, maybe have a separate professional social media website. A lot of people use LinkedIn, but maybe things would look better, depending on what you're doing, would look better on Instagram or some other platform. So by all means, make your professional profile where you are, where you're sticking to professional content of publicly accessible, something that somebody would be, it would be very easy for somebody to find via Google. You could even, if you do have professional social media, add it to your resume if it's something that you want your employers to see and if it's relevant to the particular position. When you are thinking about your social media, especially your private or your personal life social media, make sure you're avoiding or removing embarrassing or inappropriate photos, controversial conversations or posts, And any comments, especially negative, about your current or previous employers or supervisors. I think most of us in real life do have social media, but just know that what you put out there publicly can affect how you may be perceived as a candidate for a particular role. So it's always a good idea to do a brief read through of your social media and make sure there's nothing on there that's going to come back and bite you during the interview process. When we are, this is kind of the final getting ready step for the interview. Interviews can be more formal or more informal, so you can be prepared. I feel like things have shifted a little bit during the pandemic, especially when we're having more virtual interviews than in-person interviews. However, I still think it's always a good idea to put your best foot forward, and when in doubt, go more formal than informal. Make sure, even if you're not there in person, make sure that the interviewer can feel your positive energy coming through in your attitude, in your body language, etc. Make sure that you are being confident, and your confidence is really going to make an excellent impression on your interviewing team. And this is especially important when you're being asked questions where you're being asked to kind of critically evaluate yourself, and demonstrating your problem-solving skills and demonstrating how you reached a positive outcome will really help you. Don't bring up your salary unless the interviewer does first. And make sure that you are asking pertinent questions to demonstrate your interest in the job and in the overall organization as well. Here are some popular questions that and this is the kind of thing, like I told you, I would write down popular questions with the answers on the back on little flashcards. These are the kind of things you're going to come across. And these are things like, so tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Tell us about a time when you overcame a struggle or something like that. Interviewers tend to start off with these more general questions. And so these are good things to prepare for when you are getting ready for the interview. And like I said, my favorite way to do it is literally right on one side, the question of a flashcard, flip it over and write my answer down. I found, rehearsing and timing myself and making sure that my answers were succinct and, like I said, too, sounded natural. Like it did not sound like I was memorizing a speech. It sounded like I was just speaking naturally, to be things that were really helpful for me when preparing. Questions you should not answer include questions about your age, your marital status, and anything about your family members, anything about your race, national origin, or ethnicity, anything about your sex, sexual, or gender identity, any disability disclosure, anything about your citizenship status, whether or not you're pregnant, and anything about your current salary or benefits. If someone on your interview team does try to ask you a question like this, if it's not directly related to the roles and responsibilities of your particular job. Make sure that you stay polite, but don't answer the question, and shift the focus back to the role that you're interviewing for. So there are two methods that we're going to be looking at. The first, the SHARP method, is for answering more general question, and it's a guideline. So these are the questions that you're writing down on the flashcard, right? And these are the words and the guidelines that you want to use to answer a question like, so tell me about yourself. You want your response to be specific. You want it to be honest. You want it to be appropriate. You want it to be relevant, and you want it to be positive. So SHARP. This is an example of how not to answer the "so tell me about yourself" question. Well, I'm a mother of two beautiful daughters and married to my wonderful husband of 15 years. We love to go camping and spend our free time being physically active. I used to work at big tech pharmaceuticals in their research division, but they never listened to anything I had to say, so I quit. I really like helping people, so I volunteer at my church a lot. What's wrong with this response? Well, it's very personal. It's not super related to the job. I mean, she mentions in one of her sentences that she says that she worked at this place, and then she says something negative about her experience there. And she mentions her family status. She mentions other personal details about her family, what she likes to do in her free time. That doesn't really help the interviewers assess what she's going to be capable of doing in her potential role at this company. So let's see how we can take this specific, honest, appropriate, relevant, and positive SHARP method and craft an answer on the back of our flashcard. So tell me about yourself is the question, and here is a SHARP method answer. I was a laboratory technician at big tech pharmaceuticals for 4 years in their research division. Primarily, I was responsible for entering data sets and researching current medical patents and chemical standards. I worked closely with scientists and was involved in the development of a product or service of some kind. Before big tech, I worked as a research assistant at the Cancer Research Center of Medical University, where I finished my master's degree in chemical engineering. There, I assisted PhD students and doctors in preparing laboratory equipment for use and ordering supplies. So we can see that this person's response is very specific. It summarizes her past work that might be relevant. It's appropriate because it's talking about her work experience. It's positive. She's talking about all of her work accomplishments. And it's honest. Everything in this response probably matches what's included on her resume and cover letter. So that's the SHARP method. And again, this is for answering those very general flashcard questions, as I call them. The SOAR method is a little bit different. This is for answering more situational questions that might be specific to the job. And basically what you're trying to do is respond to how you handle conflicts or how you problem solve. So SOAR stands for a situation, the obstacles involved, the actions you took to overcome these obstacles, and the positive results. The caveat is there's no right or wrong way to answer this, but you always want to make yourself look good when responding to this, and you want your answer to focus on particular skills such as decision-making, communication, and critical thinking. So here is an example of a question that might be answered with the SOAR method and how not to respond starting out. So the question is, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult situation at work. What was the final outcome? And here is the less than ideal response. Well, there were a lot of problems I had at my last job with my supervisor who would just never listen to me. He thought just because he was a scientist, he could just ignore what I said. I told him that there was a better way to enter the data, but he just dismissed me. I knew I was right, so I just did it my way because I wanted to make sure the data was entered correctly and more efficiently. So here, she's criticizing her supervisor. She's not really describing the situation or the obstacle super clearly. She does tell us about her actions, but not in a way that paints herself in a particularly positive light. And she doesn't really give us a good result that makes herself look good or himself look good. So let's recraft this using the SOAR method. While I worked very well with my colleagues, my supervisor did not like the way that I entered data. I explained to him that I found a better way to enter the data, but he was skeptical of the new method. I was able to demonstrate to him that by entering the data in a different way, I was able to cut down on the data entry time by 25% and capture another element of the data that may be useful if the results needed to be replicated. As a result, we were able to finish the research ahead of schedule and save the company some money. So she uses, or the person here uses very specific improvement time, and they make themselves look really good by mentioning that in the result, they were able to both complete a project ahead of schedule and save the company time and money. So the result is very clearly and effectively described. The situation is laid out pretty well in the first two sentences, and the obstacle is laid out well without making the supervisor look or sound bad in the example, because remember, we want to be as positive as possible here. So this is the type of response that you would want to use for a problem-solving question like this. This is kind of a slide where it's like a self-examination. So you could decide what method you might use to answer any of these questions. Tell me about yourself. What are your strengths, weaknesses? Where do you see yourself in a certain amount of years? And tell me about a time when. And I'll just tell you what I think after learning about SHARP and STOR. I would still use SHARP for the first one. For the second one, I might use both. To explore my strengths, I might use SHARP, but then to talk about my weaknesses, especially how I overcame a weakness or how I problem solved around one of my weaknesses to still get a positive result, I might use SOAR. So I could use both methods in the second question. Where do you see yourself in X years? I would probably use SHARP for that one, and then I would use tell us about a time when. I would probably use SOAR. And again, this is all very objective or subjective, and you could decide what you would like to use. There's not a right or wrong answer in how you choose to present yourself. The only thing is you always want to make yourself look good and paint yourself in the best positive light. So whatever, if the sharp or sore method manages to do that better, then I would say use that. But maybe think about how you could use one or both of these methodologies to answer any of these particular questions. Interviewing during COVID. Yes, we are in a lovely pandemic time, and things have changed from the good old days back in February 2020 and before. So, because of safety issues now, we are doing a lot of interviews remotely. So when you're preparing for an interview, make sure, most importantly, that you're in a place with a reliable phone and internet connection. Make sure that you are familiar with popular video chat services such as Zoom, FaceTime, Skype, Microsoft Teams, and you'll feel confident when you're logging in for that interview. Make sure you have a dedicated interview space, preferably in a room with a door that you can shut so it's private and there's less noise. Make sure that your space that you're using for the interview is professional looking, clean, and well lit. You can also, a lot of these services like Zoom and Teams especially have the backgrounds that you can set. Just make sure that you're selecting something professional and not like going into an interview with a tropical beach background or something like that. Many of the platforms I know, particularly for Zoom, also have a blurring feature you can use where people won't be able to see what exactly is behind you. So you may want to use that. I think the most important thing is that your environment is well lit and people can see you well on your computer screen. Make sure that your household members, if anybody's going to be home while you're interviewing, know what's going on. Make sure that your phone's ringer is off. Everything is set to do not disturb. Maybe warn interviewers ahead of time, like if you have a dog and they occasionally bark or something like that, warn people ahead of time about things like that, and try to keep everybody who's not you and not the interviewers out of your interviewing space. Also, because of time constraints, I know that some organizations have like all-day interviews or half-day interviews. So maybe in pandemic times, rather than doing that, because they're not allowed to have you on site, you may have multiple video interviews instead, or multiple phone interviews. So that may increase your time commitment. You can, to prepare, make sure that you're familiar with the technology that's going to be used during the interview. You can ask for a test session, or you can download the software ahead of time and do a practice session with a friend, just to make sure that everything's going to work right during the actual session with the interviewers, and there won't be any technical difficulties. Dress like you would when you're going to an in-person interview. You can, I think it would be completely appropriate to ask ahead of time what the dress code is for the interview. Maybe it's an environment where they are a-okay with business casual, but I would say, if you're not sure, or you don't feel comfortable asking, it's always a good idea to dress a little bit more formal. Like I said before, just make sure to apologize in advance if you know there may be any distractions, like, if you have the kids at home and in another room, they may occasionally hear some background noise, or your pet, or, if at a certain time your lawn's getting mowed or something like that, they may hear some background noise, emergency plumbing situation. Life happens. People are usually pretty understanding about that, but it's always good to bring that up before you begin interviewing. Make sure you're looking into the camera and you're trying to keep eye contact as much as possible. And just in case things do go wrong, make sure you have an alternate way to contact the interviewers. So if the video software worked fine on your test run, but on either end, you just can't get it to work during the interview, maybe you transition things over to a phone interview instead. Technology failures happen, and again, people are usually understanding, but it's always good to have a contingency plan in place, and that makes you look good too, because it shows the interviewers that you really want to be here, and you're preparing for other possibilities. So here's what I hope you all took away from all of this today. Your resume is an opportunity to lay out who you are in great detail and all of your accomplishments. The interview is your opportunity to pitch yourself as a candidate using what you laid out on your resume. Make sure that you are really familiar with all aspects of your resume and be able to pull different experiences to highlight your skills and accomplishments during the interview. Make sure you use the sharp or SOAR methods to answer various questions where appropriate. And these things can help sharpen, amplify, and make your responses a lot more powerful. Make sure that you do your research on the job, on the company, and make sure you ask questions too to demonstrate your interest. In the interview, be pleasant, be positive, be gracious, and be enthusiastic. Those things are going to really help you make a good impression on your interviewing team. I want to thank everyone for joining me today and for going through all of this. Again, I'm going to take a minute and repost the slides for you in PDF format in the chat, because I know a few people came after I posted them the first time. If anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat. Please post them in the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer. I'm still here. I am just being quiet while I repost the slides. Open. Okay, so you have the slides, and I'll give everybody just a few minutes to post their questions, their thoughts. Please remember that there is a survey that will appear at the end of the webinar, and we appreciate and value your feedback. Oh, you're welcome, Pamela. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation and you found it useful. I certainly hope that You do. I'm going to give everybody just one more minute. And then we will end. Wonderful. And here, I will put my email in chat. If for any reason you missed the slides, you can email me and I'll also be able to send you a copy of them. All right, I don't see any questions from anyone, so I'm going to close us out now. My email is in chat. If you do have any questions that you wanted to ask, you can just send me an email. I'm happy to respond. I want to thank everybody again for attending today. And I'm going to close as our usual host of NJSL Presents usually does by saying be safe, be well, and we hope to see you again very soon. And have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, everyone.